Hi, I am Brooke Nelson and welcome back to my channel. This is probably my third full-length video on my channel, and it is the very first, though, in this brand new series I've created that is called Should I Read? ... question mark. And so kind of the whole point with this is not to tell you the entire story and spoil the whole thing for you. That is really not the goal, because if you've already read it, you probably know that you wanted to read it. This is still a review, so it still might be super fun for you to watch and think, yeah, I agree with these things. No, I don't. But my main goal here is to give you an idea of whether this is a story that you would probably like, or maybe something that is not quite up your alley. So, my very first story in this series, which I am super, super excited to talk about, is The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne Young. So, this is a story that I actually had a NetGalley advanced reader copy of quite a while ago, and I had put off reading it because I had so many other books on my TBR list. Just, it felt like a gazillion. I had way too many, and I finally thought, once this had been released, I thought I have to just sit down and read it. Like, it looks very interesting, but I just had to finally sit down and say, this is the book I'm going to read right now. I just have to get through it. Whether I like it, whether I don't, I have to just get through this story because it's been sitting there forever and it's already published, and I had an advanced copy and I didn't even use it as an advanced copy anymore. It was just basically a regular copy, but through NetGalley. But that aside, I did read this story. I read the whole thing in, it probably took me a couple weeks, not very long. I generally take a really long time to read books, so that does not attest to what the story was like at all. I want to say, first of all, I just read stories extremely, extremely slow because I'm trying to absorb every little detail. If I read something fast, it's usually a bad sign because it usually means that I hated it and I was trying to skim through it as fast as I could. So that was definitely not the case here. I read it pretty normal Brooke reading speed, and let's just get right into it right now. My overall rating for it would be an easy 5 stars. So the second that I put this book down after I was done with it, I thought, yes, this is my perfect book for me. I thought it was amazing. So the very first part that I liked so much about this was the way that the story was crafted. So I thought it was very, very creative, the way that it was put together. It features multiple timelines, which I really like as long as it makes sense to me. This book definitely made sense, the way that it went between timelines, and it didn't do a lot of skipping back and forth, which helps because that can sometimes make it confusing if you're going here, then here, then here, then here, and then you're going back through all of it. It was not like that. I have read some stories like that. Kate Morton does a lot of books that skip between timelines a lot, and that sometimes you have to literally write down, here's who's in this timeline, here's how they're related, because I can't quite process it all the time. I get a little confused with it. So this one, it stays pretty much in one time period, and then it will make a move, and then it'll do a little bit of back and forth, but it's pretty minimal and it makes a lot of sense. So I thought the way that it was done was very creative. I'm not totally 100% sure I understand the concept of the, I guess you would call it time travel. I don't know if you call it time travel, but it's time travel-esque, and I'm not 100% sure that I understand the entire concept and how that works in the story. I'm like 90% there. The other 10%, I'm like, you could convince me that I was totally wrong about how I understood it, but I'm pretty sure I understand what's going on. While I was reading it, I did not have these thoughts, like, do I get it? It was afterward, I thought maybe I didn't understand any of it, actually. So, overall, I think that the switching between timelines sort of thing was pretty easy to understand. It was very creative how it was done. I haven't seen it written in this way a lot, so I really like the way that it was written. The second part of this book that I really, really like are, I guess it's multiple things, the characters. So I really like our main character, June. I think she's wonderful. She is somebody that the second I started reading about her, I was rooting for her. I thought she was so interesting and unique and just a kind of person that you don't hear a lot about in literature. She's very much a loner type of person, but she has a couple people that she's close to, but it's mostly familial bonds. And so that's just the type of character that I know there's a lot in real life that exists, but we don't see a lot of fictional characters like that. That's more of a real person thing that's like deemed not interesting enough for literature. So I think it was really cool to see a character like that be a main character because I think that the way that she was written, I really understood her a lot and I really felt for her. And a lot of things that I saw in her, I feel the same way. And I kind of related to her in that sense. So I think that helped a lot. I really, really enjoyed her. I haven't enjoyed a female main character that much in a very long time. And something about her is you can so tell that June Farrow is a female written by a female. You know what I mean? So there are some men that can write women that are convincing women. Like Riley Sager, he's phenomenal at writing girls who feel like girls. But sometimes men will fall into that loop of writing women that don't quite feel like a real woman, just like women will write men that are like ideal men, but not really what actual men are like. So I think that this story was good in the sense that the women felt like real women. The men, some of them might not have felt like real men, but the focus of this story was definitely on the women. I would say this is definitely a women's fiction book. So for that reason, I really enjoyed it. I think that June was written phenomenally, and all of the women in the story were really written very well, where I don't think there was one woman in the whole story or girl who I didn't automatically just really like and want to root for and want good things to happen for them. So that was really a deciding factor in how much I liked it, is how much I liked the people who were important in the story. That is very important to me, that I like the important characters, because I love a plot-driven story, but a plot-driven story cannot draw me in unless it also has characters that are great. So I would say this story is kind of probably more character-driven, but there's kind of character and plot going on. It's kind of a good mix of both. So whatever you're looking for, it probably has a little bit of that for you, and that's something I like so much about it. Now, something else that I thought about multiple times throughout the story, especially toward the beginning, was the title sounds so much like The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue to me, The Unmaking of June Farrow. All I kept thinking about when I first picked up the book, when I started reading it, was, is this going to be like a weird kind of remake of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue? Which, ironically, I'm reading that at the exact same time. I just haven't finished that one yet. I'm probably 90% of the way through, but I'm still working on that one. But I'm reading these two at the same time, and it's very funny because I thought they might be similar, and it turns out, no, they're not similar at all. So if you have read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, do not be thinking this is a copy just because it's the whatever of whatever. Also, don't be fooled into thinking that it is a young adult book because of what the title is like. It's not a young adult book. It's definitely just a regular adult fiction book. Probably women's fiction too, I would say. But it is not young adult. It does not have that feel. So if that's what you're into, this is definitely not it. This woman is like 35, 34, 35, and she acts like it. She doesn't act like a kid. It's not full of like funny little quips. It's not overly dramatic. It's not, the stereotypical young adult stuff, which I love because I love young adult, but it's not any of that. So I don't know why it has such a young adult title. It is not young adult. It's a very good title, but it is a very young adult title. So don't be fooled into thinking that's what it is. One of the other things about this story that, kind of going back to my favorite things about this story, is that it really feels like, and yes, it's going to be exactly what you think I'm going to say, because if you read my reviews on my blog, on Goodreads, all of them sound exactly the same when it comes to stories with women who are mothers. This book really feels like a celebration of being a mother and a celebration of mothers. And I'm not going to spoil that by telling you what that means, because if I tell you what it means, it kind of ruins like a lot of the book. So I'm not going to tell you what it means, but it really feels like a celebration of moms and of being a mom. And I love that. I had the same feeling when I read Clytemnestra, when I read Electra with Clytemnestra in it. I get these books sometimes that, especially women's fiction type books, when they go in the feminist direction of pro-motherhood. I really like that. I think that's very cool of them to do. And I love when it's written eloquently and it feels real. I'm not a mother myself, but I can imagine that this is how moms feel. I mean, I have a mom. I know a little bit about being a mom. So I imagine this is kind of the feeling that moms get because it's described as something so different from anything I've experienced. So I'm going to say that it probably is close to correct. I don't know if the author is a mother either, which is something I should actually look up, because if she is, it would make a lot more sense why she's able to describe this stuff that, like, I feel like in a way for a description to come into your head, it has to first be something that you have experienced, because otherwise writing about it is much more difficult. It's more difficult to capture that exact feeling and put it into unique words that people haven't used before. And so I think the way that mothers and motherhood is written about in this story, it just feels very authentic. It feels like she probably is a mother or has really done her research on what it feels like to be a mother, because there are just parts of this story that are so interesting how they're written. And I don't know, that kind of makes me want a kid, actually. Reading this story was kind of like, I don't know, I didn't want a kid, and then I read June Farrow, and now I kind of want a kid. So thanks for that, Adrienne Young. I guess I will maybe have to name my firstborn after her. That's probably only fair at this point. But overall, I would say 5 out of 5 star book for me. It made me feel all sorts of emotions. It was exciting. It was sad at times. It was kind of scary, not horror scary, just like, oh dear, what's going to happen sort of scary. And I really like that kind of the thriller feel to it. There was mystery to it, which I really liked, because I think that no story is totally complete without that little mystery added in. I think that just brings the whole thing together, kind of ties it up real nice. And I think that the ending of June Farrow was absolutely perfect. I really didn't know where it was going to go. Like, the story has to hit its climax at some point, and then it has to go down from there and come to a resolution. And when I started this story and when I was in the middle of it, I didn't really know how it was going to go there, eventually get to the resolution. I didn't know what the resolution was meant to be. And once you realize what that is, then all you want to do is keep reading until the very end to figure out what happens and what she chooses. And it's really a story about choosing your fate, which I think is wonderful. And it's not in a fantasy book, which, I mean, it's fantasy, okay? There's fantasy in it, but it's not like high fantasy. It's low fantasy. So it really feels authentic and real lifey, and June gets to choose her own fate in her pretty real life, which I think is very cool and kind of a good message for women with women's fiction. So I would say if you are interested in stories that are not just deep and meaningful and thoughtful about women, but that are also kind of, how do I want to put it, like exciting as well as being deep and thoughtful, I would say this is definitely the story for you. I did not go into it thinking it was going to be any kind of super meaningful story. I've never read anything by Adrienne Young, so I just didn't know what her writing was like. And I was super, super happy with this story. I would 100% read another book by her, like right now, if I didn't have 1 million other books on my TBR. But as soon as I finish my other million books, then I will probably look up another one of hers so that I can keep reading her stories, because I'm really, really in love with her writing. It is beautiful. It's not over the top. It is just, She writes a lovely story. I'm so happy I read this one. I'm really glad I got it as an ARC because that kind of forced me to read it so that I didn't just skip over it. This is one where you can definitely judge by the cover too, because the cover is beautiful and the story is equally beautiful. So I hope this video helped you out in deciding kind of whether this is a story that you would enjoy. I hope it is a story you enjoy. And if you've read it or if you plan on reading it, please let me know in the comments. Let me know what you thought, or let me know what you're thinking about, like going into it. If you're excited to read it, what you were thinking about it. If you agree with anything I've said in the video, please let me know. I would love to hear that. I always reply to my comments. And I also want to remind you, going on to a totally different train of thought and a different genre of book, that I do have a couple books of my own. They are called the Half Theft duology. So the first one is just called the Half Theft, and they are available on Kindle and in paperback on Amazon. And if you are interested in thrillers or young adult stories, those are definitely going to be the books for you. So I would love for you to check those out as well if you find those interesting. I hope you found this video informative, helpful, fun, interesting, something. And I hope to see you again very, very soon.